Game development in 2026 is full of opportunities. With AI and new technologies, small teams and even solo developers can now create things that were before just reserved for big teams. But with all this freedom, a new challenge comes around. It is to decide what should actually exist. There's so many possibilities that it becomes harder to make those decisions. And that's when many promising games disappear. Most developers don't struggle because of creativity. They struggle because they care deeply about their game. They want it to have everything that's possible. They want their ideas to breathe and have enough space for the game to be the best. So the danger is not creativity, it's having a game that is so full of potential that it never gets the chance to actually exist. What you need is not a mindset that destroys creativity, but one that protects it so the game can actually be born. A mindset that makes the game real, even if that means that some of the features might not make it into the version 1.0. And that is what I mean with publish-oriented mindset. It is the habit of having one question always through the process. Does this make the game get closer to release? One of the hardest things in game development is to understand if you're actually progressing or you're just accumulating work. You can be busy every week. You can improve systems, mechanics, visuals, and somehow still feel that you're not getting closer to the finish line, but it's actually getting farther every week. If you don't know me yet, I'm Norman, a game creator and producer that focuses on one core thing: helping indie developers actually ship their games so they can create more of them during their lifetime. I use my experience in building games and producing them, including commercial releases, to guide developers all through the process from scratch until they can release their games. A successful launch without burnout or getting stuck. And that's exactly what this video is about. Early on, when I was working on the video game Duck Paradox, a precision shooting platformer where bullets bounce around everywhere, that is also a roguelike, with time loops, the vision kept changing. It started as a platformer, then we decided to turn it into a roguelike. We had to add a bunch of different random levels, and then a twist that made the player have to decipher how to go through the next levels in the game. All of these ideas were very good. The problem wasn't the lack of ideas, but actually that they were so many that we didn't have clear boundaries. At some point, we had to have a clear answer of what is actually this game? And as important as that, what is it not? And once that was written down and cleared up, everything became much easier. Still painful, but very clear. That's why I find very important to have a vision of the game. That's the first pillar I wanted to talk about today. Now let's go with the next one. This is where many indie studios slowly fall apart. You're working, things are improving, but there's no sense of control. For us, deadlines kept moving, scope kept growing, and everything felt reasonable until the publisher started asking very concrete questions that we couldn't answer. And there is when the next pillar comes in: production control. It isn't about pressure, it is about knowing what you're committing to. Once we fixed the scope and stopped renegotiating every week, progress finally stopped feeling chaotic and it started feeling intentional. Or is it intentional? I don't really remember how to say that word. Anyways, the next one, once you have that, is risk awareness. Here's one uncomfortable truth. If everything feels safe, you're probably ignoring risk. In Duck Paradox, it showed up as, we can adjust later. This shouldn't take too long. Yeah, we'll figure it out somehow. Those thoughts are completely normal, and they're also very dangerous. Once we started naming risk and designing around them, they stopped just being a hope that they disappear. and a project ending risk, and they start just being manageable and predictable. Which brings me now to the last pillar. Even if you have predictions of your risk, even if your estimations are right, there's one thing that you always need to take care of, and that is your communication structure. This applies for teams, but also for solo developers. Misalignment happens when everyone has a different picture of what the game is and what it's going to be. Between the teams, between the developers and the stakeholders, even the gamers. When you're a solo developer, you have to keep even yourself accountable. Every week, you're going to have new ideas, you're going to change things. And if you're not taking care of checking what's going on every time, you might lose what you were actually going to do, and that's going to break your whole structure. So documentation and assessing this weekly with meetings with yourself and with the other responsibles of the game are crucial for your game to work. Once you have all these pillars aligned, something magical happens. You start shipping, not because you're working harder, but because you stopped drifting. With Doc Paradox, that was exactly what happened, and we ended up getting many nominations. Not because we had better tools or a better specific environment or team, but because we had better alignment. So if you're working on a video game right now, ask yourself which of these pillars might be the weakest in your process at the moment. Your vision clarity, your production control, your risk awareness, and your communication structure. In one of those is where you're going to see that progress might be leaking out. If you want some help figuring that out, I have a free release orientation assessment. It's just a test that takes about 5 minutes that you can do on my website. That will clearly tell you which one of these pillars is the weakest and give you some tips on how to improve them. And if you want to go deeper into the whole process of game development, I have a book and a course that you can also check on my website that might help you out. Talent starts games, but structure finishes them. You're just a visionary. Ended up being very challenging. Best indie manager. Organize our Scrum board. You might not make it in time and you might end up being a mess. Keep a clear communication, but not overloading. Polish, juice. It's about creating a long-lasting experience for the future.